Barack Obama's presidency is a lightning rod for debate, a complex tapestry of soaring rhetoric, polarizing policies, and a post-presidential glow-up that feels more like a Hollywood reboot than a quiet retirement. Critics like Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld have taken sharp aim at his legacy, slicing through the polished veneer to expose what they see as a gap between Obama's charismatic promises and the tangible outcomes of his 8 years in office. Their critiques, laced with sarcasm and unfiltered candor, paint a picture of a leader who mastered the art of narrative but stumbled on delivery, leaving behind a legacy that's equal parts myth and missed opportunity. Imagine Obama reflecting on his time in the White House, perhaps wondering if a third term would have been worth it. He's joked about a fantasy setup where he'd pull the strings from behind the scenes, lounging in sweats in his basement, feeding lines to a stand-in president through an earpiece. No podium, no ceremony, just him, calling the shots without the spotlight. It's a quip that reveals a self-awareness of his knack for stagecraft, but it also fuels the skepticism of those who question whether he was ever truly running the show. Some, like Rogan and Gutfeld, argue that his presidency relied heavily on optics, with executive orders often signed by autopen and key decisions shrouded in ambiguity, leaving room for speculation about who was really steering the ship. Obama's post-presidency hasn't exactly faded into quiet reflection. Instead, he's transformed into a cultural icon, trading the Oval Office for a Netflix deal, a sprawling Martha's Vineyard mansion, and a steady stream of memoirs that drop with the regularity of a chart-topping artist's mixtapes. He's no longer just a former president. He's a brand, a storyteller weaving tales of hope and progress, while critics like Rogan and Gutfeld call it a slick rebrand of a hollow legacy. They see a man who swapped policy substance for celebrity cachet, delivering wisdom from a pedestal built on contradictions. Where supporters see a dignified elder statesman, detractors see a smooth-talking figure whose charm often outshone his results. Rogan, with his raw, unfiltered style, approaches Obama's legacy like a fighter sizing up an opponent. He doesn't buy the nostalgia, viewing Obama's presidency as a masterclass in political theater, long on charisma, short on impact. To Rogan, Obama's speeches were like interpretive dance, mesmerizing to some, but ultimately lacking a clear destination. Gutfeld, meanwhile, wields his trademark sarcasm like a scalpel, cutting through what he sees as Obama's glossy emptiness. Together, they frame a presidency that promised transformation but delivered, in their view, little more than well-crafted soundbites and a cult of personality. Take Obama's foreign policy, for instance. Rogan zeroes in on the infamous red line in Syria, a bold warning to Assad that crumbled when the dictator called America's bluff. To Rogan, it's a metaphor for Obama's approach: big threats, weak follow-through. The red line wasn't just a diplomatic misstep, it was a symbol of a presidency that leaned heavily on rhetoric without the muscle to back it up. Gutfeld piles on, mocking the irony of Obama's Nobel Peace Prize, awarded before he'd barely settled into the White House. The prize, meant to honor his potential, became a punchline as drone strikes multiplied across the Middle East, earning applause from elites while leaving critics like Gutfeld questioning the disconnect between Obama's pacifist image and his actions. On the domestic front, the economy under Obama is another sore spot for his critics. Gutfeld skewers the shovel-ready jobs promise, a phrase that became a running joke when the 2008 recovery staggered along, weighed down by sluggish growth and unfulfilled pledges. The stimulus package, sold as a lifeline for Main Street, often felt like a bailout for Wall Street, with banks propped up while homeowners drowned in debt. Rogan points out the sleight of hand. Obama preached economic salvation but cozied up to Goldman Sachs, leaving many Americans feeling like they'd been sold a bill of goods. The recovery, when it came, was uneven, and the phrase "recovery summer" rang hollow for those still struggling to pay their bills. Healthcare, Obama's signature achievement, is another lightning rod. The Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, was pitched as a universal fix for a broken system, but its rollout was a masterclass in chaos. The website's launch was a disaster, crashing harder than a bad sitcom, and the promise of, if you like your plan, you can keep it, became a bitter punchline for millions who lost their coverage or faced skyrocketing premiums. Gutfeld compares the debacle to a wedding DJ spinning tracks while the venue burns down, with Obama grinning through the chaos as if it were all part of the plan. Rogan sees it as emblematic of Obama's broader flaw, a knack for selling dreams that didn't survive contact with reality. The cultural landscape under Obama also draws fire. Rogan argues that the man who campaigned on unity ended up presiding over a fracturing of American identity, with identity politics exploding into a maze of competing grievances. What began as a call for togetherness morphed into a culture of division, with groups sliced and diced into categories that felt more like a corporate diversity checklist than a unified nation. Gutfeld takes it further, joking that Obama's legacy is less about progress than about branding dissent as moral failure. Disagree with his policies, and you weren't just wrong, you were on the wrong side of history, painted as a relic in a world he claimed to be reshaping. Then there's the surveillance state, a topic that hits hard for Rogan. Obama campaigned on transparency but oversaw an expansion of NSA programs that turned privacy into a relic. The agency wasn't just chasing terrorists, it was scooping up data on everyday Americans, from phone calls to emails, in a digital dragnet that felt like dystopian fanfiction. Rogan sees this as a betrayal of Obama's promises, a slick pivot from hope to control, with the deep state handed the keys to a surveillance machine that operated with little oversight. Gutfeld, ever the provocateur, imagines Obama signing off on these programs with a wink, all while preaching accountability to adoring crowds. Obama's post-presidency only amplifies the critique. He's no longer just a politician. He's a global influencer, producing Netflix documentaries and preaching about disinformation through his Obama Foundation. Yet critics like Gutfeld point out the irony. The man warning about falsehoods presided over a political era where narratives often trumped truth. From the Russian collusion saga to the Hunter Biden laptop story, Obama's allies in the media, according to Gutfeld, played gatekeeper, shielding narratives that aligned with their worldview while dismissing inconvenient facts. Rogan, meanwhile, bristles at Obama's selective outrage, particularly his framing of Trump as a racist over the "very fine people" comment, a narrative Rogan sees as a deliberate distortion that fueled division rather than healed it. Immigration is another area where Obama's record draws scrutiny. He deported more people than any president before him, earning the nickname "Deporter-in-Chief" from critics on the left, yet he cloaked his policies in progressive rhetoric that promised compassion. Rogan sees this as a classic Obama move: talk like an activist, act like a pragmatist, and let the press clean up the contradictions. Gutfeld imagines Obama standing before the Statue of Liberty, preaching hope while quietly signing off on policies that left dreamers in limbo. It was less about sanctuary, they argue, than about smoke and mirrors, with press releases standing in for real progress. The Iran deal is another sore point. Gutfeld paints it as a diplomatic gamble, a handshake with a regime chanting "Death to America," while Obama walked away like he'd just brokered world peace. The deal, which funneled billions to Iran, was sold as a masterstroke but felt to critics like a bet on a rigged roulette wheel. Rogan sees it as another example of Obama's preference for optics over outcomes, a deal that looked good on paper but left the world more unstable. Both men marvel at how Obama could spin such moves as victories, his charisma turning shaky policies into celebrated milestones. Education, too, comes under fire. Obama's tenure saw inner-city schools continue to crumble while unions thrived, a disconnect that Gutfeld mocks as prioritizing political allies over actual students. School choice and parental involvement took a back seat to bureaucratic inertia, with funds poured into studies and consultants rather than classrooms. Rogan calls it what it is: a failure to deliver for the communities Obama claimed to champion, particularly in his hometown of Chicago, where violence and failing schools festered even as he raised campaign cash nearby. The climate change agenda is another target. Obama jetted to green conferences on Air Force One, promising a revolution in green jobs that never materialized. Emissions kept climbing, and the promised clean energy future felt more like a campaign slogan than a reality. Gutfeld jokes that Obama's biggest environmental win was probably sticking a solar panel on his golf cart for clout at Martha's Vineyard. Rogan, meanwhile, sees the hypocrisy in a man warning about rising seas while building a seaside mansion, preaching sacrifice from a position of privilege. Race, perhaps the most charged topic, is where Obama's critics see his greatest missed opportunity. As the first black president, he had a historic chance to bridge divides, to foster a post-racial America. Instead, Rogan argues, he leaned into narratives that amplified division, framing dissent as prejudice and policy disagreements as moral failings. Gutfeld takes it further, accusing Obama of weaponizing guilt to silence critics, turning debate into a moral litmus test. The result, they argue, was a country more divided than ever, with unity sacrificed for the sake of ideological branding. Obama's celebrity connections, his bromance with Beyoncé, Spielberg, and other A-listers, add fuel to the fire. Gutfeld paints him as less a president than a prom king collecting photo ops, with state dinners resembling Oscar after-parties. Rogan sees it as a distraction, a presidency that prioritized aesthetics over governance, with every speech rehearsed like a Hollywood script. The man who promised change, they argue, was too busy curating his image to actually deliver it. Chicago, Obama's political cradle, is a microcosm of their critique. The city, plagued by violence and failing schools, was a stage where Obama could have shown real leadership. Instead, Rogan says, he flew over the chaos, raising funds while ignoring the bodies piling up in his backyard. Gutfeld calls it a betrayal of the communities Obama claimed to represent, a refusal to confront the failures of his own ideological allies. In the end, Rogan and Gutfeld see Obama as a master salesman who sold America a vision of hope but delivered little to back it up. His presidency, they argue, was a triumph of style over substance, a narrative of progress that masked stagnation. From healthcare to foreign policy, from the economy to race, Obama's legacy is less about what he achieved than what he convinced people he could achieve. His post-presidency, with its Netflix deals and seaside mansions, only cements the image of a man who turned governance into a brand, leaving critics like Rogan and Gutfeld to pick apart the glitter and expose the emptiness beneath. Yet Obama remains a towering figure, his charisma undimmed, his influence undeniable. For every critique, there's a supporter who sees him as a transformative leader who navigated a nation through crisis. The truth, as always, lies in the tension between the two. Rogan and Gutfeld may land their punches, but Obama's story, flaws, contradictions, and all, continues to captivate, a testament to the enduring power of his narrative, even if the results never quite match the rhetoric.